Joining me from Zurich, Switzerland, Joe Belan. Let's talk a little bit about where you were raised in Port Colborne, Ontario, a small town of 20,000 people near Niagara Falls. Tell me a little bit about your surroundings growing up in that setting and how you decided to move to other cities, countries, even continents that open up a whole new world of experiences.
Sure. As you pointed out, I was raised in a small town in southern Ontario, Port Colborne. It was a city that back in its prime had a very large industrial base. There was a steel mill there, and it was very much an industrial town with a lot of immigrants, which really helped shape the culture of the community, and there were a lot of soccer players, and both of my parents were immigrants to Canada, and so naturally the two sports that I played were soccer and tennis, and I also played hockey growing up as well. Eventually I was scouted for the junior national teams of Canada and had an opportunity to play at the under 17, under 20, and under 23 levels for Canada, and that gave me a lot of opportunity to travel the world, represent my country. During the time that I was playing soccer, I was also studying and completed a degree at the University of Western Ontario's Business School in London, Ontario, and then from there I moved on to a job in New York, and then my work and my career has taken me to a number of countries in Latin America and overseas in Europe, and now I live in Switzerland with my family.
So your tenure as a player, you were a U20, U23, U17, former youth international. Obviously, at the time that you decided to go into university, the old CSL had folded. So as soon as you graduated, you decided to get your professional career started and never look back.
If we go back in history, I actually did play one season in the old Canadian Soccer League, and it was right after I graduated from high school. So I think I was only 18 at the time when I played for the Winnipeg Fury, and that was the last year of the Canadian Soccer League. Then the league folded, and there really wasn't much of an opportunity for many players in my generation at the under-23 level for a professional career. Some did go overseas, played in England and other places, some of whom had some advantages because their parents had ancestry in some of those countries, so obtaining a work permit was perhaps a little bit easier for some of them. But for the rest of us, there were many pathways for a professional career in that period of time.
You said both your parents were immigrants. What nationality?
Both of them were originally from Croatia.
Croatia. So it makes sense that you decided to fall in love with the beautiful game.
Yeah, in my household, soccer was equivalent with religion. My brother played, and my dad and my uncle played, and it was talked about at the dinner table, and it just became part of the culture and within our family.
So you've been living in Switzerland for a number of years, working in investment banking. I'm sure you're a proud Canadian to fly the flag. Being from Ontario, why decide to put a team in Saskatchewan? Was it you were approached by Paul Byrne, who was now stepping down from the league?
Well, Paul did first approach me, and when we initiated the discussions, one of the markets where there was no solution for an ownership group was Saskatchewan, and that dates back to early 2017. And so the first step for us was to do a scoping study and take a trip out to Saskatchewan and determine whether or not the project could potentially have legs to it. And so I think after we did our first trip, we were encouraged enough to continue the process. And nearly 2 years later, we're still looking at pursuing a team in Saskatchewan. And the summer soccer series that we put on this past summer provided us with, I think, a good foundation from which to build on.
You formed your own company called Novatrek Capital. Is forming a successful club organization and bringing those elements together, you see in large part similarities between the two, business and pro sports?
Yeah, there are certainly elements in pro sports that have parallels with other businesses. A lot of the basic building blocks and tools that you're using to build any business, you're going to apply in building a professional sports club. There's some differences between pro sports clubs or pro soccer clubs and other industries, and we've certainly gotten to know about some of those differences and unique aspects over the past 2 years as part of our research and due diligence. But for the most part, in building any organization, you need some basic building blocks. You need to develop a culture. You need an organizational structure. You need a financial plan. You really need to understand your market and what kind of product you're selling. So these are the essentials, really, of any business.
Good projects bring good people.
And I think the project of soccer is a great one for Canada. I think so far it's attracted some great people and some passionate people at all levels. It's great that people are rallying around this project and trying to help the game of soccer in Canada. I think it's going to have a lot of benefits. It'll take, I think, a number of years to see some of those benefits, but I think it's all headed in the right direction.
So Saskatchewan is a province that is forgotten a lot of the time. Talent-wise, it has a lot of soccer gems. Matthew Nadi was in Croatia in hat-trick splits. Nicolas Bacchus, was in Greece and Uruguay. Thomas Hassal with the Whitecaps. Several other Saskatchewan products also abroad. Should you get a team in the near future, how much local talent would there be? Obviously, would that be a decision that would be held to the coaching staff specifically, since Edmonton and Calgary, for example, are very heavy on local talent?
Yeah, we certainly have as one of our objectives to develop as much local talent as we can, but I think we also have to be realistic that we just don't have the depth of top-notch players in Saskatchewan compared to many of the other parts of Canada, including Calgary, Edmonton, Southern Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia. So we have to work within the resources and our means. That's why we felt, again, that the Summer Soccer Series was so important to give some of the younger players that featured in the team the experience and playing in some high-level competition to assist them in their own development.
In the Summer Soccer Series, you played against the Foothills UFC2 and you played against the Whitecaps U23 development squad. Tell me the lessons that were learned in terms of an infrastructure standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a corporate sponsorship, and of course the interest of the overall audience.
Yeah, look, there's a long list of things that we learned from the series. I think it's probably too long to cover on this particular call. What we wanted to do is to simulate what a pro club would be and the challenges and also the opportunities that come with that. We started out on a smaller scale, trying to understand how to build the overall organization, how to build soccer operations, what that entails, understanding the dynamics and the characteristics of our market, getting our message and communications out to corporate partners and sponsors, telling them about soccer and educating them. I think that overall, across a number of different initiatives, that there was a tremendous amount of education, both for the general public in Saskatchewan and also with corporate sponsors who are perhaps less familiar with soccer compared to some of the other more traditional sports like football and hockey and more recently lacrosse. So part of the exercise that we were going through this summer was also part education of what soccer is all about, the benefits that it brings to the community, and why it's a differentiated experience going to watch and support soccer versus some of the other sports that people are more familiar with.
Who else is part of the ownership group led by you?
At this point, it's three principals, myself, Al Simpson, a businessman from Regina, and Grant McLaughlin, who originally is from Saskatchewan but now is based in Toronto.
You said in an interview in early 2017 that your vision was to build a soccer-specific stadium. How important is the right size and atmosphere in game experience?
Well, I think the atmosphere and the environment in which you play a game, it helps control the overall fan and game day experience. So if you don't have the right venue to showcase the product, it's just not going to play well and create a good experience for people. So I think that the venue that you play at is equally, if not more important than the product on the field play. So I think that stadium is really critical, and it has to go hand in hand with the on-the-field performance as well. You can't have one without the other.
Is 2021 the goal? And if not, then how soon could we see this become a reality?
There's a number of balls in the air at the moment that we're working through. 2021, we think if we map out all the things that we need to get done between now and that period of time, that's a realistic roadmap for us to get to the CPL. There's still a considerable amount of work, considering the fact that many of the other clubs who started in the inaugural season had a much further head start than us. They had stadiums in place, they had infrastructure, they had affiliations with soccer clubs and a pool of players to draw from. So, we were really well behind the curve in terms of preparedness versus the inaugural teams. And so all we're doing right now is trying to play catch-up. We think that there's still a fair amount of work that needs to be done so that we can ultimately integrate very seamlessly with the rest of the teams in the league and not point it out as an expansion team, which means, we don't want to be the bottom of the table and the bottom dwellers. We want to be able to compete and be respectable on the field and off the field and have a very exciting environment for people to watch soccer in Saskatchewan. But that just takes time for preparedness. So we think that 2021 is a realistic timetable, but even then there's still a large amount of work that's still required, and it'll require us to work very hard over the next 18 months to be able to achieve that.
Right, so basically just get all the pieces together and just analyze everything. But I'm sure it must have helped, watching from the sidelines how it all unfolded, all the lessons that have been learned. I'm sure the league is new in this. When you join, you already have a pretty good idea of what to do, what to improve from other clubs who are learning as well.
We're learning and analyzing, but we're also walking and chewing gum in the sense that there are other things that we're building. I think people have to understand that we literally were starting from nothing. So many of the other clubs who were part of the inaugural season, if you look at someone like FC Edmonton, they already had a full-fledged team. Yes, there was a one-year hiatus, but they had a stadium, they had an organization, they had a presence in the community, they had an academy. We literally had none of that. And so I think when you look at each of those pieces that FC Edmonton had or other clubs in the CPL, that's a huge gap for a group that's starting from scratch. So what we did with the series is we were learning and we were testing and analyzing, but at the same time we were also putting down foundation for an ultimate club and the overall infrastructure for that.
Next year the goal is to have more exhibition home games to make it look more realistic as a calendar?
Yeah, that's the plan, and I think as well with 7 or 8 games, it provides an opportunity for our players to get more competitive matches, and we'll also look to give them, like we did this summer, some out-of-province games, very similar to what a PDL season would look like for someone like Foothills or Victoria Highlanders, rather than just a 3-game series, the 2 games that we did in Calgary back in July as part of our overall preparations.
Should there be a stadium option that would pop up in Regina? I know you said that you've considered both Saskatoon and Regina.
Yeah, at this point we haven't seen anything from Regina been presented as a viable stadium option. I think we're focusing our efforts for the moment on Saskatoon and what we'd like to do at the Prairieland venue. Right,
that is, and it's an exceptional venue. It looks like an old English stadium. It keeps the sound very well.
Yeah, again, I think it's important, going back to the earlier question about venue, I think it's important to play soccer in a proper facility. You just don't get the same experience watching soccer in a very large facility where, with maybe a track around it far from the field, or a very cavernous venue where you're playing in a 40,000-seat stadium. That's just not quite the same experience as a small, intimate experience. And I think seeing people's comments about CPL and the venues, there's a broad range of venues, and I think the ones that really capture people's excitement are the ones like Spruce Meadows. It's small and it's intimate. I think the West Hills facility and that Pacific FC has is really nice. It does resemble something out of Europe, and that's a great venue to watch soccer and to experience it. So I think that we'd like to follow that path where it has some very specific features of a soccer stadium to help build that overall experience for people when they come watch a soccer match.
When you think of a good fit for the team's head coach position, what characteristics come to mind?
I think we want a coach who has a very high football or soccer IQ. I think that's an important characteristic. I think the second one is someone who has very good man management skills, and that comes into a bit of the psychology of the game. You can focus on the physical aspects and what you need to do in terms of preparing physically, but I think that sports and soccer as well, a lot of the game is won on the psychological aspects of it. So someone who understands the balance between those two aspects, I think, is going to be important for us as a coach. And as well, someone who is committed to developing young talent around a very strong technical core of skills. I think the kind of team that we want to build is one that's very technically sound, very athletic, and also has a very good mentality going into every game. So I think that's the kind of coach that we want to attract, that builds that kind of culture around the club and our expectations.
So off the record, you told me that your wife's family is from Argentina. My guess is that's who you support in the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have some conflicts because my parents are originally from Croatia, so I tend to cheer for them in the World Cup. Argentina is another one because of the family connections. And now that I'm in Switzerland and my son is integrated with the Swiss culture, that now we cheer for Switzerland as well. I think all three good teams, usually go deep in the tournament, so it always keeps the World Cup exciting to watch.
To finish off, what would you tell a casual Campiel supporter about this expansion process and someone from Saskatchewan to be patient?
Well, I think the key word really there is patience. It's something that you're trying to build for the long term. I know that people can get very emotional about soccer. It's an emotional sport, but I think that sometimes you have to take the emotion out of it and try to build what you think is going to be sustainable long term and putting in the right pieces to do that. And sometimes it's not an overnight process. It does take some time. So we've tried to take a very methodical approach to it because we think it's an important project. We need buy-in and support from the community. And every move that we make on the proverbial chessboard is one that we want to make, and do the right move on rather than, digging ourselves a hole and then having to dig out of it. So that's, I think, the approach that we've taken. Hopefully it's the right one. We'll see where it goes. And our commitment still is towards, moving this project forward and ultimately joining up with the CPL at some point in the future.
Joe, thank you so much. Would love to attend the inaugural game of this future Saskatchewan team and through a typical South American asado.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, thanks a lot for having me, and it was nice to talk to you.